So everyone, welcome to Let's Talk Native on this Tuesday, February 4th, 2020. While this program may not provide a path to spiritual enlightenment, we do encourage and in some cases start conversations. We kind of break the rules here for Native Radio. We don't do prayers or buffalo speeches. We take a tough look at history, oppression, and survival. We talk about culture, the arts, politics, and identity. And we may step on a few toes along the way. But our real goal here is to bring people together by breaking down what separates us. We'll take on the false narratives, provide critical thinking to all that is heaped upon us, and we do all right here from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. So let's talk Native. But first, let me remind you that our audio streams live at www.letstalknative.com. We stream video of this show on our Facebook group pages via Facebook Live. We take the audio and we put it up on SoundCloud, which puts it out on all of your favorite podcast platforms, including now Spotify. We take the video and we put it up on our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. So you can subscribe to our podcast, you can subscribe to our videos. And if you subscribe to our video channel, you also get a chance to check out some of our short form videos as well. Hey, I'm all by myself today. Jake is out sick. He's not so sick, but he didn't want to bring the flu that's going around his household in. So he was trying to protect me. So that's I greatly appreciate it. Like I said, we are in the first week of February, so we the year's already slipping by pretty quickly. I got a topic that I want to discuss here today. I have talked about the Doctrine of Christian Discovery many times. I've described what the Doctrine of Christian Discovery is in terms of this church doctrine that would so influence colonization, imperialism. It was used to encourage slavery and the taking of lands and the killing of indigenous people who were considered enemies of Christ because they were not Christians themselves. It is really behind both slavery and genocide. And they aren't exactly the same thing, although certainly slavery was used as a part of genocide, and some slavery certainly was a component to genocide. But they are distinct things, even though they overlap. But I want to talk about the legacy of it. I mean, we know what the Doctrine of Christian Discovery was, and like I said, I've talked about it. I've talked about how it became codified into U.S. law through one court case in particular, Johnson v. McIntosh, and in 1823. How it was contradicted oftentimes by the very language that presidents, including George Washington himself, negotiated in terms of treaties. You would think that this church dogma, and especially in a country that claims to have a separation of church and state, would have never survived and never would have had the influences that it does. So when I talk to you today about the legacy of the Doctrine of Christian Discovery, look, I'm not even dealing necessarily with the history, the land loss, the slavery, the massacres, the like I said, the genocide, all of that. I'm not even really talking about that, because one of the other parts, and frankly, of lesser concern to those who promoted the Doctrine of Christian Discovery, was conversion. This whole notion that that once they had to kind of get past the idea that, yeah, we were less than human, but we were human enough to convert to, so they could claim in some sort of altruistic way that they were giving us something. They were giving us their faith. They were giving us their belief system. Of course, they were supplanting it. They were stripping ours away in what is now called a war crime. Condemned by the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, condemned by by countries and the UN and the international community across the board, and in many ways, and I say to an extent, condemned and repudiated by many Christian denominations, Christian churches. Not necessarily the Catholic Church, although the Catholic Church claims that they've moved past the Doctrine of Christian Discovery and that it's no longer their standard. They said that they've adopted other principles, that it's no longer in effect. Well, you can claim that it's no longer an established or promoted papal bull, but the problem is once it gets codified into law, it has long-term and lingering effects. a legacy. Now, one of the legacies of the Doctrine of Christian Discovery is it wasn't just about land and land title. Obviously, if you look at how much land Native peoples' territories have been reduced, how much our territories have shrunk because of theft and because of this very principle that because the Catholic Church and the popes themselves would say that a Christian nation could claim the lands of pagan peoples. That's the whole basis of U.S. property law. It's really, its foundation lies on this stuff. So it's easy to see how white people, how the Christian nations of Europe, which were white folks, could make this claim and could strip and create this whole notion of land title, like owning paper that was that was attributed to real estate. Now, so the land loss thing is obviously a legacy, but along with the land loss was not just this idea that they could claim the land, but they could claim power over the land. See, this power component is the jurisdictional issue. It's the idea that only one sovereign could exist, and that sovereign was somehow bestowed by God, and that's where the whole royal family stuff, the monarchies, and all other stuff come from. That there's this, that there was this power bestowed by God, and so this ends up being part of that part of that legacy is jurisdictional issues, and we're fighting those every day. Our battles over everything from gaming to traffic citations, all of that stuff is associated with that. So this is where it gets very, 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 very tricky. And where does it leave us? Because here's the other flip side of it. Not only do we have this jurisdictional battle, but to me, one of the tragedies of these legacies is not just jurisdictional issues, but the fact Christianity. If you go across native territories, or from Alaska to the tip of South America, you're going to see Christianity in all the people, native people, brown people, not just the white folks, and not just brown people, black people. So in spite of the fact that the Doctrine of Christian Discovery was used to promote slavery and genocide, we went along with it. Now, I'm not saying that every native person is a Christian, but you know what? You look, throughout Central and South America, Christianity, Catholicism itself, the actually denomination that develops this Christian dogma, they're all Catholics. Not all Catholics, but predominantly Catholics. I mean, Catholicism is a huge part, and it's crept in to even some of the native cultures. But you know what? Same thing with us. Now, I know a lot of native people, a lot of people who call themselves traditionals, who claim, no, I'm not a Christian. But they'll just replace the word God with creator. That's not our culture. We have a creation story, but we don't have in our creation story, in our culture, we don't have an all-knowing, all-powerful, predetermining, all-seeing, all-hearing creator in our culture. No, we don't have that. We have a story that talks about the left-handed twin and the right-handed twin, but they're both creators of sorts. I mean, because that's what they did. They created, but they didn't create everything. Our creation story already starts with a certain level of creation. So that's not even a part of our culture. And yet we have people that'll switch that around like nothing. And it'll slip out. You'll hear people say stuff, not just, oh my God, and now I'll hear people say, oh my creator. I mean, that's just replacing words. The influence is still there. It's crept into ceremonies, funeral ceremonies. And I've talked about this a great deal. In our culture, the old ways, we talked about a person returning to their mother. Now it's, oh, our loved one is on his final journey to the sky world to be with the Creator. That sounds an awful lot like Christianity to me, and to everybody. And of course, I'm not trying to pick on the Christian influences that have crept into people's traditional beliefs, although that's pretty pervasive. But just flat out, here in Colorado, there's like 5 or 6 churches right here, right on territory. 5 or 6 of them. I don't even know for sure. I think there's one that's closed down. But yeah, there's literally a handful of churches in just one strip of road. So it's there. I mean, the influence is there. And so what is that influence? Well, part of that influence gets into this whole God and country thing. It's very difficult for people to separate their beliefs, their Christian beliefs, and in spite of the whole separation of church and state, which isn't real, the whole God and country thing. And of course, within that Christian faith and belief are these kinds of passages like "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth," which is like promoting pacifism. So, and I say pacifism, but not necessarily because it does away with war. Because look, Christian nations of Europe, they are the most warlike peoples on the planet. Yeah, I know. Everybody wants to try to condemn the Islam and Muslims for terrorism. It starts with Christians long before you had the kind of violence that people try to attribute with the Muslim world. It was mostly perpetrated by Christians, including things like dropping atomic bombs, including things like again, slavery and massacres and all that other stuff, killing in the name of their faith. I mean, that doesn't start with Islam. That starts with Christianity. So, but the pacifism I'm talking about is the pacifism to resist assimilation. I mean, we have 100 years of residential schools, church and government working hand in hand to do what? To kill us, to kill the Indian, save the man, to kill a part of us. Even when they claim they weren't trying to kill us, they clearly are trying to kill a part of us. A part of who we are, our identity. They were trying to strip that away. Strip away the native identity and put a Christian identity in its place. Why? Again, to make us more domesticated, to make us more like them. And actually, not even like them in terms of aristocracy. Look, in the Doctrine of Discovery film that Sheldon Wolfchild and Stephen Newcomb did, it's clear that when they were converting native people, it wasn't to make us like them. It was to make us converted barbarians. We were never going to be like them. But again, and I don't want to pick on native people because, again, Christianity is so pervasive within the black community that Martin Luther King, a Christian minister. And, I posted a meme just yesterday or something like that. I said that, look, some people fight for equality, others fight for freedom or to be free. And they aren't the same thing. Somebody said, well, is that like the difference between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King? Yeah, that's a pretty good analogy. And I'm not saying fighting for equality is wrong. But if you're only trying to fight for equality within a system that's oppressive, you just don't want to be oppressed any more than the guy next to you. That's equality. To be free, to have a free and independent existence, that's a different thing. And to be free is to be free from that oppression. Now, we're all, under the pressure of life. I mean, we all have some things that we aren't free to do whatever we want all the time. I mean, there's laws of nature, not laws of man that limit, all of, the freedom of all of creation. It's not supposed to be everything is free. That freedom, it comes at the cost of everything else. There's supposed to be a harmony there. So when I talk about fighting for freedom, I'm not trying to, I'm not talking about killing oppressors necessarily. I'm saying resist oppression. So, but you can see the difference because if you've already been constrained somewhat by this, by church dogma to say, no, I just want to be equal. I want to be treated like everybody else. And abandon your identity, abandon your culture, abandon what kind of makes you distinct. And it's not even an abandonment because that's actually stripped away. Look, part of the reason Native people enlist in the armed forces as high as they do isn't just Christianity, although it plays a big factor in that. It has to do with being so oppressed. Oftentimes, and that oppression is more severe against the non-Christians within Native territories. I mean, because we still do have some people who reject it. And in fact, if you go across Native territories, historically, and I say within, I don't want to say historically ancient history, but in in contemporary history for Native peoples under U.S. colonialism, you could see the people who had and the people who didn't, the haves and the have-nots. The haves were the people who complied with the federal government. The haves were the people who worked in government-sanctioned tribal councils. I mean, if you look at band councils or tribal councils and the people who worked in tribal government and the people who didn't, that was the distinction between the poor, the very poor, and the people who weren't so poor. Sometimes the people who were wealthy or certainly powerful. I mean, and that came hand in hand with complying. And I'll tell you, you know, as you went across, native territories, U.S. and Canadian side, you would see the level of Christianity that influenced the band councils. I mean, they'd open up with prayers, not the own degree with that. I mean, prayers. I mean, you've got the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma declaring that through a tribal council resolution that they are a Christian nation. I mean, you see this is so pervasive across native territories. The relationship, part of the reason that residential schools were that our people were complicit with them is because they had already accepted the fact that this Christian influence was going to come into their territories. And, that's just a matter of fact. So when I think about the legacy of the Doctrine of Christian Discovery, Christianity is that legacy. And the fact that, like I said, not just Native people, but Black people, the victims of slavery. And whether this is out of despair or the lack of hope, so you pin your the last vestiges of hope on the very religion they used to oppress you. And that's Black people and Native people. I mean, it is, you can't, I mean, it's a little bit difficult to fight against the Doctrine of Christian Discovery if you're Christian. And I know, look, there's plenty of churches that claim to have repudiated the Doctrine of Christian Discovery. But what does that mean? If there's no truth or reconciliation, as they say, if there's been nothing to address or redress the crimes committed under in the name of these churches, including slavery. I mean, let's be clear. These churches have gotten wealthy. It's ironic for me to listen to the Catholic Church talk about declaring bankruptcy, and mostly to get out of all the payments they have to make because of the clergy sex abuse scandal. The Catholic Church declaring bankruptcy, and they'll pick a little spot to declare bankruptcy. The overall Catholic Church, they're not at risk to lose their fortune. And where did they get their fortune from? This Doctrine of Christian Discovery was about enriching them. And not just the Catholic Church, every church. They use this notion of taking people, land, subjecting people to servitude. That's how these churches got wealthy. And you know what? Oppression is how they still get wealthy. When I look at these mega churches and how much they strip away from the poor, I mean, it's pathetic. It's pathetic. And yet, there we are. And it's, and they strip it from the poor white people too. Don't get me wrong. But the idea, and I saw somebody posted something on Facebook, a couple of years ago. It was a white guy, bearded guy, looked a little bit like, one of the Duck Dynasty guys or whatever else, who asked the question, why would Native people and Black people, accept Christianity? Why would they accept that faith, considering how that faith was used against them? This isn't even about condemning Christianity as a faith. I mean, it's not my thing either way. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the church stuff, of the organized religion. Judaism, Islam, Christianity, none of it, and all the variations of the two, or of the three, or any of it. But without even getting into the problems of these faiths, you only have to look at historically what some of these faiths have done. I mean, and Christianity has been the most negative influence on the world. I mean, it lies at the foundation of capitalism, imperialism, slavery, genocide, all of that stuff. Most of the wars. I mean, arguably, even the Holocaust was about, was a Germany, a Nazi Germany, that tried to place a higher priority on Christianity over Judaism. And so the people that they would, that they would kill in these gas chambers were just non-Christians. To the credit of Jewish people, they've managed to, break that, that barrier that kept them from being considered white. And now, and now Jews can be as big a white supremacist as anybody. And we see it. But it is really, really difficult for me not to talk about what that legacy of the Doctrine of Christian Discovery is, because it isn't just the fact that we've got land loss. It's jurisdictional. It's this notion of sovereignty. Because, again, when the courts took the Doctrine of Christian Discovery and embedded it into U.S. law, they made that claim that our sovereignty, and they acknowledged that we pre-existed and that we were free and independent people before Europeans came. And they said that our sovereignty was necessarily diminished upon discovery. And again, this discovery title, this discovery power, the power of Christian discovery, that because they held that in both their belief system and in their legal system as having power, and a power that would strip the power away from other people. So every time we get into a battle over sovereignty, over our own autonomy and distinction, the foundation of that having been stripped away or diminished is always associated with the Doctrine of Christian Discovery. So every jurisdictional battle we have, whether it's a property line, whether it's land use, again, whether it's a criminal or a civil issue, or a traffic violation, any of that stuff, it is still tied to the Doctrine of Christian Discovery. And look, and I want to applaud places like Yakima who actually, as they were fighting like a tax issue associated with a fuel delivery company in Yakima territory, who, when the Yakima Nation decided to submit an amicus brief into that case, it was twofold. First, they talked about the wrong and the wrongly applied Doctrine of Christian Discovery. I mean, half of their brief was condemning the role and the place and the fact that the Doctrine of Christian Discovery is illegal and it's condemnable by the entire world. So there's that. And then they spent the other half of the brief talking about the treaties that they had that should have secured. Now, the courts, they didn't want to touch the first half. They left the whole Doctrine of Discovery thing alone. They didn't even they pretended like that wasn't even part of what they submitted. But I applaud them for submitting it, because we are left today wondering what do you do about the Doctrine of Christian Discovery? I mean, even if even if the Catholic Church repudiates it, which they really haven't done. I mean, we know the world has. I mean, the third affirmation of the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples could not be more of a clear repudiation of the Doctrine of Discovery. I mean, without naming it, they basically say all policies and practices that promote superiorities of peoples, whether it's national origin, whether it's race, ethnicity, or religion. That it's all wrong. It's scientifically false. It's legally invalid, morally condemnable, socially unjust. That's what the UN, that's what all the nations of the world who are part of the UN agreed upon. Oh, except for four. Four of them wouldn't vote for it in 2007. The United States, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. Those four wouldn't vote for it. Now, they all claim to say, well, we support the aspirations. What the hell does that mean? It means we still have problems in our laws. Our laws are still based on the Doctrine of Christian Discovery. So we can't accept in full force the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And this is what people don't want to recognize. Look, we can talk about the UN DRIP and the Declaration of Human Rights all we want. But if you have laws, not just on the books, but in place that are being used every single day, that are based on racism, that haven't been stripped away. I mean, I've listened to lawyers say, no, the idea of fighting or trying to overturn Johnson v. McIntosh, the law, the ruling that puts this into, codifies into U.S. law. Oh, that might be a bit of a challenge, they say. They say that could be a problem. Hey, look, we're at the bottom of the hour. Look, like I said, I don't have Jake here with me today, so I am trying to run the board on myself. So I'm going to try to go out with some music, and we'll take a bit of a break. All right, thanks for coming back. Just a little break there with some tunes. Look, I'm trying to walk and chew gum at the same time here, so I apologize if there's any hiccups on the controls. This is so much easier when Jake's in the studio, and again, I wish Jake gets better. I know his mother is sick, and he didn't want to bring that flu virus into the cramped quarters of our of our studio. So for a personal standpoint, I'm grateful for that, although I am kind of fumbling around here a little bit. Hey, I want to thank our sponsors. I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses for supporting this show. Eric White and ERW Enterprises, the folks at Grand River Enterprises. Those are the companies that basically help us do this on a weekly basis. And there's more to this than people may be aware of. This isn't just standing in front of a camera and doing a 1 hour broadcast twice a week and 2 hour broadcast in New York. There's a lot involved. We have, services we pay for. By the way, I talk about us being, a podcast that is now on Spotify, and of course we're on iTunes and Google Podcasts, formerly Google Play. We started delving into the numbers, and we're getting over 3,000 people catching our podcasts a month. I mean, it'd be nice if it was 3,000 people for every podcast, but we're getting there. Our numbers are starting to grow, and so what I'm talking about here. And look, if you're a Christian and you're offended by what I'm saying here, just bear with me. There's a point to be made here, and it isn't just about condemning how much influence this very oppressive church doctrine has had, but just bear with me. But I do want to again thank those people who support the show, including those of you who throw a few dollars on PayPal and go to our PayPal account, and you can find that. Do go to our visit our website, which is letstalknative.com. There you can make a donation. I don't have the controls that Jake has to throw a bunch of the images of our shirts that we've got in our store. That our collaboration with Teespring to do not only some Let's Talk Native T-shirts, but also some powerful imagery. Jake did a great job putting some shirts together that address things like L. Frank Baum and Wounded Knee and George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, all these guys. So by all means, go to our store and check out our shirts. Also got a great one that mocks the Washington football team with it should say Washington, but it says Whiteskins, and it's got the epitome of a white skin. Although he's more orange than white, I guess. But the representative of whiteskins, Donald Trump, on the image. So check that out. Also, we do have a specific shirt for missing and murdered Indigenous women that is based on a flag design that I developed a few years ago. So you can check those out. I also want to thank all of you who do share the podcast. I mean, part of the reason that our numbers are growing is word of mouth. And, I want to thank my wife in particular who shares this show on, 20 or 30 group pages as we're streaming this on Facebook Live. And, of course, you can share it once we post it up as a YouTube video. You can share the podcast, the SoundCloud page, or the videos. And, of course, you can continue to share because these shows stay on Facebook. I mean, you can look. We post them almost as an announcement, so you can continue to share them. And of course, I appreciate that. Part of it is to have this conversation and then let the conversation grow. A couple of weeks ago, I talked about how my friend Jed Morey, who was formerly with had the Long Island Press and now is with Newsbeat, did a great article after he not only joined me on my show, but I kind of in an offhanded way, I asked him if he saw this segment that was on Fox News. Yeah, I know Fox News, about freeloaders, and it talked about Native people being freeloaders, and he did a great piece, and talked about how him being half Mohawk, half Jewish, he can see that in the Jewish community, they have had people who've been able to continue to keep the horrors of the Holocaust on the front, in the front of people's minds, and be involved in prosecuting war crimes and everything else. But he said, he said he's almost envious because on the Mohawk side, on the Native side of his ancestry, there are no such people. I mean, look, I do a show, and it's not to condemn or say that I'm not doing enough or others like me aren't doing enough, but there aren't the champions. There aren't the people that are out there keeping it real in front of people's faces, all the time, on the forefront of people's minds. So, it's easy to look at, war crimes tribunals and, all the Nazis who were persecuted and prosecuted. Of course, it's a little lopsided because there are other countries, including the United States, who committed war crimes who are never, held to account. But anyway, that's an example of having a conversation, and then it having its own life, I guess. and so Jed Morey is an example of taking a small conversation and spreading it into what was a pretty good column that that made the rounds. I mean, I shared it and I promoted it, but also he put it out on his information. So that's what I hope. I hope that some of the conversations I have, even if they are uncomfortable truths, and there's no question about it. When I talk about the Doctrine of Christian Discovery, and I talk about the fact that that there is this legacy that continues, which is how pervasive Christianity is amongst Native people and Black people. I mean, that's an incredible legacy. I mean, the effectiveness of changing people and stripping away their belief systems, stripping away whatever culture, cultural influences are. And even when some of that culture is hung on to, the fact that you could still have influences. And look, Christianity has made its way well into longhouses, into ceremonies. I mean, look, there's some people who want to suggest that that Handsome Lake, the guy who is known as Handsome Lake, had visions of Daganowida being the same as Jesus Christ. And there are Native people who, Haudenosaunee, traditionals, who to this day believe that Daganowida, the peacemaker, was Jesus Christ. Oh, they try to do some correlations of dates and times, and of course, they claim that when Handsome Lake had his visions, he saw Daganowida come to him with holes in his hands and his feet. Oh, come on. I mean, and of course, the Mormons do the same thing. The Lost Tribe of Israel, all that stuff. I mean, they try to make that argument. And of course, many of the other denominations, it's just pure conversion. Oh, we're going to save you. Born again Christian. Born again Christian. Born again. I mean, if you don't die, I mean, and I guess that's what they say. They claim to, they've killed the old self and they've reborn themselves. They've somehow given birth to themselves as Christians. And the influence that it has on how we conduct ourselves, excuse me, how we govern. I mean, it's funny because I've looked at Native peoples, even the so-called tradition. I mean, Ray Halbritter, he literally got the federal government to believe that he represented traditional government, and yet he was Seventh-day Adventist. Look, we've got people who sit on council who have been not just Christians, but are part of the Masonic Temple, the Masons Lodge, all that stuff. I mean, and without getting into the whole Masons thing that the way some people do, but that's still a Christian organization. I mean, I would argue that if you believe some of this stuff, it doesn't make you less Native, but if those belief systems change your behavior, and they create a situation where you're abandoning much of the stories and the teachings and how we live our lives, the quality of our lives. If we change that, if we bring that these influences that we have no way of verifying, that's the whole notion of faith. See, Native people, we were not a faith-based people. We were a nature-based people. We looked at nature and we derived, our understandings of the world based on the relationship. That is actually condemned. The Catholic Church, when the movie Avatar came out, the Catholic Church literally condemned the movie because they said it deified nature. It made nature appear to have, a godlike presence. Ooh, what a crime that would be. Now, I don't even want to go there in terms of trying to deify or turn nature into God. The way it was taught to me was that we do not know the name or the place or the face of that power or where that power dwells. But we know that there's the power of creation. And how do we know? Well, because of creation. Creation is obvious. We see it. It's all around us. So while we may not know the source or the name or the shape or really know what that power is, we don't need to know. What we need to do is acknowledge the results of that power, and not just acknowledge it, but give thanks and not destroy what that power of creation has made. Now, I know people say, yeah, but what about cancer? What about, pestilence? What about, look, most of those things are the result of man or, some other natural occurrence, or unnatural occurrence. I mean, where we live today, where man is almost the antithesis of nature. I mean, when we talk about something being natural or something man-made, I mean, we do it ourselves. We acknowledge that. So when I talk about the legacy of this doctrine of Christian discovery, which was really the legacy of using violence to spread Christendom, to expand the nations of Christianity, the nations of Christ. That's what the doctrine of Christian discovery was all about. It authorized and encouraged the Christian nations of Europe to take over the world. I mean, people want to talk about, Alexander the Great, or they want to talk about, world domination. The United States. Is there a country in the world that would claim more global domination than the United States? And look, in spite of the whole separation of church and state thing, let's be honest. Half of the United States, without really following any semblances of the Bible, claim to be Christians, and they consider it a Christian nation. And they embed it in their pledges and their songs and all that other stuff. And although they claim to have a separation of church and state, that Christian right, the ones who are all applauding, Donald Trump as he stands up and makes a fool of himself and once again for the whole world, they hang on that faith. And you know what? Most Democrats consider themselves Christians as well. So the United States, although you would be hard pressed, to prove, if you were to test a Donald Trump or half the people who claim to be Christians, they couldn't even pass. They couldn't even pass a Bible test. They couldn't. And in fact, they hang on a few issues like homosexuality and abortion as these main things. And I just heard something, and I got to bring it up. I just heard something recently, and if I'm wrong, somebody please point this out. But the irony of the Christian right and both parties, Democrats and Republicans, being so pro-Israel, but the right in particular, the Republicans, and yet they will literally appoint Supreme Court justices on one issue, abortion. And yet in Israel, abortions are not only legal, they're paid for by the government. A government that the United States sends billions of dollars to each year. So a government that lives off of the goodwill of the United States not only has legalized abortions, but their government paid for. I mean, how bizarre is that? I just throw that out there. Kind of gets me a little off track, but I felt like I just want to throw it out there. Look, if you go to church, I'm not condemning that. If the way that you cope with poverty, a lack of hope, the oppression, and let's not make any mistake about it here. Native people are still the most marginalized people on the planet. And Native people, wherever, especially when they live and still live under colonial rule. Colonialism, imperialism, that was an extension of the Doctrine of Christian Discovery. But if you believe that stuff, if you found out of the despair of being an oppressed people, a murdered people, a people of victims of genocide, victims of residential schools, if you bought into that as a survival mechanism, and you still need that to survive, I can't condemn that. I can't condemn that. But if you're a critical thinker, if you finally get to a place where you don't need that crutch, if you get to that place where you can stop believing that you're going to go to hell if you're not a Christian, and as long as you believe in Jesus Christ, you'll go to heaven. If you can get beyond that, look, there is no scientific evidence to support any of the Christian these Christian faith, these ideals. Heaven, hell. Even the good versus evil thing that that is so prevalent with all three of the major religions, the religions of Abraham, as they call them, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. Yeah, and they're all related, folks. For all of you who want to say there's only one true God, well, all three of them believe in the same God. Believe in the same God. No evidence that it exists. The whole idea of intelligent design and heaven and hell and prayer and all that stuff, no evidence for any of that stuff. But if you can get to the place where you can think critically, I challenge people to start recognizing whether it's just vernacular, whether it's something, a phrase or a comment slips in, or whether it's, something, perhaps more than that. Maybe it's how you view somebody. If it's affected by, some sort of Christian belief that's crept in, maybe we should think about that. If it's affected by, if how you handle a situation, whether you stand up or whether you cower down, and don't get me wrong, there are certain parts of religions that talk about charity. They talk about helping people. Blessed are the meek, to me sounds like pacifism, but there's also this whole idea that we shouldn't look at the people who, we shouldn't look down upon people. Of course, the flip side of this whole thing is there's the Old Testament, which is really about fire and brimstone and killing and God being a wrathful God, and then there's the loving Jesus part in the New Testament. They don't even, they're not even consistent. I don't know how people can reconcile a Bible that has, you want to talk about bipolar disorder? Well, apparently the God of the Bible is bipolar because somehow Jesus gave birth to himself. He's his own father, and all that. Look, and I don't want to make fun. I don't want to make a mockery of it all, but there are some irreconcilable differences within this belief system. And by all means, the charity stuff, the whole idea of, doing unto others and, and helping people and, and being a good steward. There's parts of the Bible that talk about taking care of the earth. But there's also parts that say subdue the planet. Subdue all the creatures of the earth. Put them beneath you. And as it would turn out with the Doctrine of Christian Discovery, you could put people beneath you too, because you could treat a person as less than human if they don't believe the same thing you believe. So we have to confront some of that. Look, and if you're hanging on for dear life, if your faith, unprovable faith, is what gets you by day to day, then hang on. Do what you got to do. But if you're at that place where you feel confident enough to start to question, because, and so why? I mean, I guess the question is, well, why question it? Why question? Why not just go along? Why not just get over it and get along with and do what everybody else does? Well, I'll tell you why. Because there's a lot wrong associated with it. And we as Native people, us in particular, we need to know the difference between equality and freedom. Because equality, I mean, the whole Christian thing is based on hierarchy. I mean, God created man in his own image and then placed, people in positions of power. And that's the word sovereignty comes from this idea that certain people claim that God gave them the power. And in fact, even Jeff Sessions, the former Attorney General of the United States, claimed that if you defy your government, you're defying God, because governments only exist because God allows them, like they're anointed. like if a government does exist, it only exists because of the will of God. So somehow opposing your government. So for all of these people who want to claim, well, I got to protect my guns because I got to fight tyranny. No, not according to some of these evangelicals. You can't fight your government. That's because governments only existed because of the will of God. See, this is where it gets complicated. Look, and I'm not, an end of days or end of times guy, or Armageddon, none of that stuff. But there are tough times coming ahead. I mean, regardless of American politics, although part of that is, contributes, but between climate change, economic chaos, global conflicts and social unrest, government corruption, some of us are going to have to figure out, well, how do we survive in a world of chaos? Well, faith isn't going to get it done. You're not going to pray and vote this stuff away. There's some things you have to, again, begin to apply critical thinking. I know sometimes I get people who comment on my shows and they say, yeah, but you don't provide any answers. Look, I'm not saying that I have the answers, but we have to recognize the problem. I do have some thoughts. I do have some answers that are hard to implement one person at a time. So I think we do have to address some of these issues. And I think we have to confront some of those beliefs that are based on oppression, that are based on this doctrine of Christian discovery. If we can shed some of that away, and look, and I don't care that the things slip into the language. I mean, people say a lot of things that are meaningless, or they use a lot of metaphors that no longer have the effect that they used to have. So I know people will say, "Oh my God," and that's certainly not a testament to somebody's belief. Even people use say, "Oh Jesus Christ," they swear and they use the Lord's name in vain. Lots of people do that. And so that's less, even if you buy somebody presents for Christmas, to me, that's less of an issue than the wholesale buying into capitalism, exploitation, colonialism, imperialism, and again, consumerism. It's tied to it. I mean, how many people just make stuff up and they say it comes from the Bible? Oh, God only helps those who help themselves. That's no place in the Bible, folks. That's made up. And yet that's what people will say. And they'll ignore the parts of the Bible that condemn gluttony and becoming rich at the expense of others. Income disparity, that the idea that wealth only exists at the at the hands of the impoverished. I'm not promoting socialism or any ism, but we better recognize the fact that we're in a place that probably requires us to rethink and retool a little bit. We better rethink lifestyle choices. And those lifestyle choices better have more to do with fear of going to hell, burning in hell for all of eternity. And it better have more to do with, than thinking that, I saw somebody post just the other day, well, if you don't believe in Jesus Christ, and you don't believe in Christianity, then, and you're wrong, you're going to burn in hell for all of eternity. So why not just believe in it? Well, because that's not really belief. If you're trying to hedge your bets by claiming to be a Christian, if you're going to hedge your bets, say, well, just in case that whole Jesus thing is real, I'm going to tell everybody I'm a Christian. You think that flies? And here's one of the other things, and I got to bring this up. One of the bases of Christianity is that man is inherently evil. And there's plenty to back that up. The irony is most of the evil that is done by man is promoted by religion. But if you believe that the only way a person can be good is by the grace of God, without understanding what any of that could possibly even mean, therein lies the problem. Therein lies the problem. So I want to do this show because it's come to my attention that one of the gravest legacies of the Doctrine of Christian Discovery is Christianity and its pervasive nature. So I want to thank you for listening. I'll be back here let's see, today's Tuesday, so I'll be back here on Saturday. Do check out my show. I'm introducing my brand new co-host in New York, Regan, who is going to be joining me, a friend of Shawnee Rice's, who's going to be sitting in, and we're entering a fund drive. But I'd like to introduce my new co-host to folks to my show in New York on WBAI. That's Thursday from 3 to 5 p.m. on WBAI, and of course we'll do Facebook live streaming of that show as we always do, and put it up on YouTube and podcast the whole bit. So again, I want to thank you for listening. Check out our website, letstalknative.com. Check out our store, check out our gallery, check it all out. Subscribe to our podcast and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And again, I want to thank you for listening. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Yahweh.